This episode of the BeanCast is brought to you by the all-new Prezi for Business. Life's too short to sit through boring presentations. Start your free 2-week trial and see how Prezi can help your team avoid death by PowerPoint. Visit www.prezi.com/BeanCast today. Also by Brandfolder. Brandfolder is the solution for managing your digital brand assets. Start your free 90-day trial today at brandfolder.com/BeanCast. Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Video conferencing provided by Pluot.co. Episode 479, A Case of Juice. Monday, January 15th, 2018. It's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob North. Thanks for joining us. Facebook has had a problem for some years now. While the rest of the world thinks of them as a media company, they insist that they are not. And now to prove that point, they are ending news promotion on their site. Is the move wise or an overreaction? Tonight we'll discuss. Also, the trouble with a voice assistant in everything, why brands are being cagey about the Super Bowl, production houses competing with agencies, plus this week's AdFail 5. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with a man who is not a serial killer. He is the head of marketing, and he's the head of marketing of the new company, Story Hunter. Mr. David Berkowitz is here. David, hello.
Hello, good to be back, Bob. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. Now, next up, we have noted speaker and consultant for strategic innovation initiatives for brands around the world. Say hello to Ms. Rose Cameron. Rose, it's so good to have you back.
You know, Happy New Year. You and I haven't chatted since the switch over to 2018. So lots of love, Bob. Lots of love.
Lots of love to you as well. Now, also with us, making his first appearance of 2018, you knew we couldn't last long without him. The one, the only, Mr. Saul Colt is here. Saul, hello.
Bob, I'm super excited to be on the very first BeanCast of the year. I'm surprised you took a few weeks off, but I'm happy to be back.
It's actually the second of the year, but that's okay. We got you on anyway. And finally, we welcome back the amazing founder of Tamsin Webster Consulting, Ms. Tamsin Webster herself. Tamsin, hello.
Hello, Bob. How are you?
I'm well. Now, there was a big story that broke at the end of this past week. Facebook, instead of admitting it's a media company, has decided to simply eliminate publishers from amplifying news stories on their network. Obviously, this has caused a great deal of consternation from publishers who absolutely depend upon the traffic that comes from their Facebook feeds. So, Saul, obviously, this is one way to solve their fake news problem, the thing that has been plaguing the social network. But is it wise for them to do it with such a heavy hammer? What's your opinion about this move?
Okay, so you've mentioned a few things here, and let's unpack it. If they're really serious about, changing the news feed, they would rename the news feed to Holiday Family Newsletter or something, because everyone should laugh here. But seriously, folks, in my opinion, here are the reasons they're doing it. There's a few reasons. They're afraid to say they're a media company because even though they share more news than any other outlet, when it comes to valuations and shareholders and stock and stuff like that, a tech company or a social network will sell for 1 million times, more than a news outlet. And beyond that, they're really smart to refocus on people connecting because they've spent the last 10 years or however long building the use case that when people connect, they share news. So news is still going to be, disseminated through their platform, but, the media companies that have been built on the backs of Facebook, like your Mashables, like your BuzzFeed, they're now going to have to pay more to share their content because one thing that hasn't changed in the recent changes is it isn't going to affect Facebook ads. So these companies are not going to get the organic lift they once had. So they're going to have, if they want to continue, the way they're going, they're going to have to be buying ads.
So let me get this straight. So essentially what they're doing is the same thing that they've done to the rest of the brands out there. They're basically saying we're going to end organic reach for your content and we're going to charge you money. How does that solve their problem in the end? I mean, how does that make them free and clear of the fake news problem? Or I suppose
I don't think they're worried. They're not worried about really being free and clear of the fake news. So you obviously looked at my cheat sheet because my next bullet point was, even if they prioritize content from friends and family organic posts, this isn't any different than what they did. I'm bad with timelines, so I'm going to guess and say 5 years ago when they first launched brand pages. There were brands that got 1 million people to like their page. And then all of a sudden they said, hey, if you want to get more than 100 people seeing any of your posts, you have to boost your posts. This is actually no different. I think that, they're very smart people. And, their whole motive for being around is to make gobs and gobs of money. And I think they're hiding behind the fake news and all these other things to just really figure out a way to get more money out of these brands. And this may not be a popular opinion, but the big winner here is probably LinkedIn. As myself personally, I've been getting way more engagement over on LinkedIn than I have on Facebook. Instagram's going to be a huge winner because they're owned by Facebook. So a lot of these brands are just going to push over to Instagram and spend their money over there. So Facebook doesn't actually lose any money here. It's almost like just separating, whatever, church and state, or you guys may have a better example than that. And I think influencers with big followers are going to, come out as a winner here, because as long as you stay away from suicide forests, brands are going to pay you to promote stuff through your channels to your followers.
Yeah, that suicide forest thing was just terrible. David, what's your thoughts on this situation? I mean, is Saul absolutely right about his estimation of the situation, or do you have a counter opinion?
When am I ever wrong?
Occasionally you are.
Yeah, I didn't think I'd have to spend tonight disagreeing with Saul, and unfortunately, I don't have to just yet. Facebook has always found a way to make everyone pay, right? And so, and if it's not with your money, it's with your data. Everyone pays through the nose. They're brilliant at it. Fairly little is different this time around, and it's also funny because if Facebook really thought that people wanted to see more of something and less of something, all they have to do is tweak the news feed a little bit. They don't even need to be public about it. Presumably, every time you click something or you view something or you ignore something, then that automatically goes into the algorithm and changes what you see next time. So the fact that this has to be a big announcement means that there's something else going on that's right to suspect. And so it probably has to do with a bigger aspect of PR and investor relations than it does any element of substance going with how they do business.
When I first read this article, the first thing I thought was, based on the headlines are all alarmist. They're saying this is killing the publishing industry. And I'm wondering, Tamsin, is that a correct estimation that this kills the publishing industry, or it just makes the publishing industry have to pony up money, as we seem to be suggesting?
Yeah, I think it's option B. I mean, I don't, what was baffling to me is why everyone seems so surprised by this. I mean, this is the same conversation we've had about Facebook from the beginning, which is if you're not paying for it, you're the product. And that means that they got to get their money somewhere. So they're going to get it from the people who will pay. And, this is, I don't see how they're killing anything other than it's brands kind of boo-hooing and saying, oh my goodness, I don't want to have to pay more money.
Right.
But if you want to get in front of those people, you're going to. So they're whining, let's say. The whiny cry baby brands.
Okay, but having said that, I mean, you know, it can be argued, as it always is, that Facebook was built upon the backs of all this news that was being shared freely by these publishers. These publishers built their business models around it. Now they have to pony up money, and the publishing industry is already severely stretched in terms of the amount of money that they're making. I mean, it's just like everybody's working on a shoestring at this point. Nobody's making a whole.
But this is capitalism. I mean, this is I mean, Facebook was built as a way for a dorky guy at Harvard to connect with like other co-eds. I mean, this was not. It was never built for the publishing industry. So, I mean, for the publishing industry to be saying, "Oh my goodness, this is the end of us." Listen, think bigger, guys, because this is not the only way to go. I mean, I just I mean, how long have each of us been told from the beginning of time, don't put all your eggs in one basket? I mean, if your strategy is Facebook and that's it, then you got bigger problems to be worrying about.
Agreed.
Okay, so I guess everybody believes, including you, Rose, that the Facebook does not offer or owe the publishers any kind of goodwill for their assistance in building up their dominance in terms of a news feed. I mean, because it's just like you can say publishers build a strategy that was flawed because it depends entirely upon one source of incoming links, but at the same time, that's where everybody is. Everybody's on Facebook. Everybody's looking at news on Facebook. That's where a majority of the links are coming from. You gotta be on Facebook. There's no choice here. So they don't owe the publishers anything. Is that what you're saying, Rose, or what you would agree with?
Essentially, I mean, you know, here's the thing. Who's a publisher, right? What defines a publisher these days? And, you know, I think what you're seeing with Zuckerberg, you know, he's fresh off this user tour that he's doing around the world. And he's probably sitting there and thinking, Facebook users are saying to me that they're sick of all these additional posts being seen on their pages and the news feeds and all the rest of it. They want to see their friends and family stories more often. There's too much of a gap in this. They feel like they're having messages shoved in their throats. There's the issue of what's real news, what's fake news. This is a safe bet for us. Publishers are going down anyhow. He doesn't owe them anything in his own mind because the publishers he cares about are the publishers known as Facebook users.
Well, let's
you know what he's probably saying to himself, if they wanted to build Facebook, they should have built Facebook.
Yep.
Yeah.
You want to get that, Joe?
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask? Yeah, we did. Can I ask a question that maybe takes this in a different direction? What is the downside of them simply admitting that they are a publisher rather than refocusing their effort on being a place for people to connect only? Because they're not really refocusing their efforts. They're just adding another paywall in here. So what is the downside?
Because people don't want to be part of. I mean, people are not going to say, "Oh yeah, let me check into this publishing feed." If that were still the case, then RSS would be like the dominant strategy.
No,
they don't have to. No, they connect with people.
They don't have to. They don't have to admit that this is not a.
They have to follow things like fair use during political season and have unbiased. I think there's some weird rules about if you have one political person on, you have to have another, and they probably want to stay so far away from all that nonsense.
And it seems to me that's the real struggle for them, because there is no. I mean, to your point, Tamsin, it's just like if they say they're a publisher, it's not like they're going to go out a whole hog and start saying to everybody, "Hey, we're a publishing platform." I'm just saying from a legal standpoint, from an obligation to their public, do they need to admit that they're a publisher and start dealing with and being dealt with in the manner similar to other publishers in the kind of the ways that Saul's talking about? Saul's bringing up some of the key points. Do they have to bring fair use into this equation? I mean, should we be allowing them to get away with this when they are clearly acting like a publisher when it suits them and not acting like a publisher when it doesn't suit them?
Here's the one thing they have going for them. because you curate to a certain extent what you see in your newsfeed based on who you follow, no two people have the same experience on Facebook. So I don't just anybody follow me, so I don't really have that many strangers. So I don't have a lot of crazy racist opinions in my following. I don't have a lot of crazy things that people are always saying pop into their feed. So I think the thing that they use as their well, we're not a publisher because we're not curating it, you're curating it. I think that's the one thing they never want to give up, even though this is, I think I saw a number today, I don't remember the number, but it was a high number. So for the sake of argument, let's say it was 90%. It was like 90% of people consume their news through Facebook or Twitter, and it might even be higher than that. So like the fact remains, this is how people are consuming news. They just don't want to actually do the work to make it, a news service.
David, your thoughts on this? I mean, it's just like, does Facebook need to own up to being a publisher, or is this a legitimate argument on their part that they are a social network, they're about connecting people, and if you as a news organization want access to these individuals, you need to pay for it because that would make you an ad rather than a published post on our platform? Does that fly with you, or do they need to be admitting that they're more in the publisher realm themselves?
Well, 2 points on this. First of all, I think the problem is that we're trying to apply old traditional definitions to these still relatively new paradigms, and so no, Facebook isn't a publisher in the way that media companies have been for the past say 200 years or so. But if you look at Saul's version of it, is this how people get their news, then they're extremely influential. And so this is where the old rules have to be redefined, and we need to set new standards for this age. And this is where Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and all these other major platforms bear more responsibility. And it's not by creating the news, but just the whole delivery mechanism has changed a lot. The other thing that I also really that just mind boggles me is that I wish I could, like Saul, get rid of all the racists in my newsfeed, but I can't unfollow all my family members. I just can't do it. So,
I know,
and
that's
I don't know
quite
how
frankly,
you really purge that list so well. But.
right, and I think that's the secret of the racist content that's coming through. Most of it is coming from friends or people that you know, because it's not like followers can publish stories that you're going to see unless you're looking for what your followers are saying. So, yeah, it's an interesting dilemma. One that I'm sure we'll be talking with many more panels over the coming weeks. But we're going to move on, and we're going to talk next about a CES phenomenon this year. Voice assistants have come to everything. We'll get to that in just a moment. But first, I want to talk about a fantastic sponsor of ours, Prezi. Look, did you know that the average person sits through 20,000 hours of slide presentations in their career? That's 20,000. Think about that. That's a large number. And even if 10% of them are any good, and we all know that's a stretch, you still have to spend between 18 and 19,000 hours being absolutely bored to tears. So don't let PowerPoint suck the life out of you. I've got a better idea for you. Put Prezi to work in your office, because the same great interactive cloud-based presentation platform that is so popular with educators and students is now finally available in a business version. It's got a team collaboration unit built right in. It's got analytics built right in, and it's already gaining a reputation as the must-have tool among best business presenters in the market today. Boy, I'm flubbing this all over the place. Let's get back to this. I can honestly say that I've never seen a boring Prezi presentation, because instead of slides, you organize information on a single open canvas, allowing you to quickly pan to and zoom in on information you want in the most dynamic, visually stunning presentations you're going to see anywhere. Even independent researchers at Harvard found in a double-blind study that Prezi was more engaging, more persuasive, and more effective than PowerPoint, which in English, people, means that Prezi presentations are simply the best way to get your clients to buy, because you're not going to bore them to death. And right now you can get Prezi for Business for free. So just absolutely, there's no reason for you to not give it a try. So I want you to go to this website for me. I want you to go to prezi.com/BeanCast, and they're going to give you 2 weeks to try it for free. And as a bonus for BeanCast listeners, they're even going to throw in an exclusive design pack worth more than $20, absolutely no cost, no obligation to you. So go to prezi.com/BeanCast right now. That's prezi.com/BeanCast. Presentations are just a fact of life and business, but boredom does not have to be. Wake up your presentations with Prezi, and we thank them very much for their support of our show. Well, if there's one thing we know from the just ended CES, it's that Alexa and Google Assistant will soon be in everything. Manufacturers were practically falling all over themselves to display their latest integrations. Marketers seem to be thrilled as well by the promotional opportunities. But Rose, is there a hidden dilemma in having everything in your house suddenly be voice activated, voice enabled, and having something listening in on everything that's going on anywhere? What's your thoughts on the move to integrate voice assistants into all of our appliances?
You know, Bob, it was like giving me a birthday present, giving me this question. I just got to say, because this has been the debate of my household all Hanukkah, because my mother actually gave us an Echo on Hanukkah. And my husband abruptly and immediately refused it.
Oh, wow.
In his, yeah. And, you know, poor mom sitting there going, I thought I'd done something right. I researched this, and it was, you know, I felt horrible. And Nori was there saying, no, absolutely no way are we going to have that bloody thing in our house.
Wow.
And yeah, and, you know, it caused a major rift, etc. Then we just got Ari for her birthday a mobile phone, a 7 Plus. And what they did with the bundle is they tried to add into the bundle the Hum from Verizon. Are you guys familiar with that? It's their new auto voice activated system to alert if there's been a car accident or anything. So it's essentially Verizon embedding itself in your car.
Right, right.
And I turned to the sales guy and I said, well, my child's 16. I don't want you listening in on her. She doesn't even have a car yet. No, I don't want your Hum. And he spent the next 10 minutes trying to sell it to me. And I just stopped him and I said, you know, training advice here, my love. This is causing too much tension in this sales moment, and you need to drop it. And I don't care if I pay $1 more per product. I don't want people listening in on my private conversations.
And you know, but at the same time, that was your choice, and you were given the opportunity to make the choice about having a voice assistant or some kind of device or some kind of whatever software listening in on your life. You've made a choice not to take advantage of the Echo. You made a choice to not take advantage of having this Hum installed into your phone.
Yep.
But at the same time, here are all these devices coming down the pike where I bet you anything, given the past experiences we've had with product introductions, that consumers aren't even going to be aware that this is integrated into their platform and may be enabling it without really understanding what exactly it's doing. It's not like we're talking about Echoes anymore. We're talking about your toaster or your refrigerator having this just as a feature, and that makes it even scarier, right?
Yeah, and the first line of this, Bob, just 1 second, Saul. But the first line of this was Google Talk, right? And we all were there when they discovered that Google Talk was staying open and listening in on conversations. And it's an issue. It's a privacy issue. So when you said, you know, there's all of these being incorporated in the Internet of Things, appliances, etc., I think that that's where some of the litigation is going to occur. The issues are going to occur is, when do we know that this is listening? So I think that's going to be the critical question of, when is it on? When is it off? Do we have control over that as consumers, really? And a lot of these companies that are employing these voice activated assistants, what do they really know about this? What does a refrigerator manufacturer know about this type of thing?
So it's funny you say that because, like, I love the idea of voice assistants, but I'm not convinced it's going to change our lives in the way we think it will, or at least not immediately. I read about internet-enabled fridges and versions of Alexa back in 1995 in the Nicholas Negroponte book, Being Digital, and now we're 20 years later, and these things are still not part of our daily life. So last year at CES, it was all about VR and augmented reality, and this really hasn't taken the world by storm the way we thought it was going to be. This year, it's all about voice assistants. I kind of feel like CES is becoming the place where you feature things that aren't, taking the world by storm now, but are still 4 to 5 years out. So 3 years ago, I actually spoke at CES as part of a side event that was run by Weber, the barbecue manufacturer, and they were debuting an app-based Internet of Things barbecue that you could be in your house. It would tell you when your steaks are ready and stuff like that. I don't know if that product is still in the market or not, but like all these things are just like, they're fantastical. But like, I think the public has sort of shown that they either don't care to the extent that we think they will, or the brands have thought they will, or they just haven't taken off, because this is like you're building a product for the coasts, New York and Los Angeles. You're not building something for middle America.
I'd agree with that, Sol. I think that there's an early adopter segment who will probably play with this and review it and talk about it. And I think the things which indicate that it may be successful in the near term or soonish are things like the use and adoption of Siri, of Google Talk, that we're becoming normalized to it, to a point where now maybe in our homes we may be more open to it. More millennials having homes and decorating those homes may drive a little bit more into that arena. But I agree with you. 1995, we were seeing it. They've been talking about this for a very, very long time. The question is, where is the tipping point on this hype curve?
Don't ignore the prevalence, though, of smart speakers. So standing in for the more data savvy Webster is Tamsin Webster for Tom Webster tonight. But I mean, the smart audio report that Edison Research does with NPR found that 7% of Americans received a smart speaker as a holiday gift, and so that's a sixth of the country now owns at least one. So that's a thing we can't ignore. And what's interesting to me is that, again, this feels like a conversation we've been having over and over again. I completely hear that, as well as the privacy stuff. And what's interesting is I think we're going to see a very similar kind of evolution like we did on Facebook, when then you have certain people who are absolutely, no, I'm not connecting to Facebook. I don't want them to know that much about me. And then there's the people who kind of get used to the benefits and the connections and all of that, and then start to get kind of inured to that loss of privacy. And I'm really curious that, with the influx of now having so many people have these listening devices in their homes all the time. I mean, I know we're not even talking about the refrigerators yet. Now, I don't think it's going to take much for people to just not even realize how much they've given away, and because they're going to get used to these devices and they're not going to want to give them up.
Yeah, but here's my playing devil's advocate. I don't disagree with you, but for the sake of livening up the show, let me say, how many of us on the panel even use Siri at all? Like I never do, except to maybe just say phone this person.
I might be the one person in America who uses Siri pretty often, and it's just because Siri has gotten a lot better in the last OS iteration. But I think most people have given up on Siri. You're right. Most people have given up because the experience is bad.
7% of Americans have these voice assistants in their home. How many are still going to be using them in a year for anything more than, hey, Alexa, what is the weather tomorrow? Or, hey, Alexa, what is the time today? Or check, there's going to be such a limited use that I don't believe people even understand the vastness of these tools and what they could be using from them. Because, one, I don't come with instructions. I don't have one, so I can't say for sure. But two, it's just like right now, I think it's a novelty. People are like, look up rap to me, tell me a joke, something like that.
So this is where I disagree, because if
Well, there's no disagreeing, David. So hold your opinions to yourself.
Talk about livening it up, damn it. So this is one of the, like, if it was really a novelty, and that's what I was, and where my gut was leaning beforehand, and then you wouldn't actually have a drop off of usage of mobile phone in the home. And I think there are certain segments, like what got me into using the Alexa. I was one of the first people around with them, and pre-ordered it well before just about anyone else did. And having a young kid at home and reducing the reliance on screens was amazing. And then creating some of these magical moments that are triggered by a lot of just the standard usage of it, like my kid wanted to hear spooky music for some reason. She turned down the lights, and she's 3 now, and so I was playing Thriller, and then teaching her about Michael Jackson, who I wasn't even cool enough to like as a kid. And so all of this, like, just that it becomes part of the environment. It also creates some really odd moments. Like I think on the privacy front, one thing people really don't realize is how much it's actually recording and how much you can even hear. Because, for instance, my kid has tried to order products. I saw once that a case of apple juice was about to be shipped to me, and I was able to stop that right beforehand. And then there was another thing that, like, there was something weird that it showed up as an order, and I went back to see the history of interactions with it. And what was really bizarre was that my kid was home with her nanny, and so one of them accidentally triggered Alexa, and then my nanny kept saying yes to my kid about something totally unrelated, just enough times to actually get this product to be ordered. And it was really, really funny and really strange. But the most striking thing was how much of the conversation it was capturing. Overall, to me, it's still a net positive. The convenience is there. And look, like, just with my purchase history and web browsing history alone, I've given so much to Amazon. I've given so much to Google. It's like, okay, it's a little more salient. Maybe I wouldn't be talking about, say, backdoor dealings with Russians to influence an election in front of a voice assistant. But for my line of work and the nature of what I do, I'm not as concerned. So I do think, as Tam said, that there will have to be this education curve, and people will start to get a little bit smarter about it, but tip the scales in favor of just saying, you know what, screw it, the convenience is worth the privacy implications.
I want to be clear here. I think that voice assistance is really cool, and I love the way that it enhances my interactions with the computing world, with the cloud, with the content that is available on the internet. Okay, so it's not a tinfoil hat argument. My argument is more from the standpoint of not how cool Echo is, or Google Assistant, or any of the other assistants. It's more about when we integrate it into new products and we put it everywhere, does that create such a liability that it actually may thwart the advancement of voice assistants in the home? I mean, is there a potential for a huge consumer backlash, Tamsin, where people have so many of these devices talking back to them that people just sort of shut down on the entire idea?
Yeah, it's an interesting challenge, actually, because we just had to name our Alexa, and now I can't call it its real name because that's what we changed it to, because honestly, because of Tom's work and speaking about that product enough, it was always getting activated. So it's I don't know. I mean, I think the worst possible scenario is that I don't know. I saw someone who set it up in such a way that the Google Home and Alexa in an infinite loop were activating each other. I mean, I think that's what that's what I would be concerned about. But obviously, they're going to have to figure out how do you make sure that these aren't competing things. But I think the answer is going to be, looking at what's the long game for places like Amazon and Facebook, and because I think they're going to try to own the listening device or the Google Assistant and those things. And why wouldn't they? They already have these massive data companies. They are these data companies. And I think, back to our first conversation, I think ultimately, as much as Amazon is currently a fulfillment company and Facebook might be considered a publishing company, ultimately both of them are data management companies and data on people. And so to me, that's going to be what's interesting is how do they consolidate? How do they use that? What realization where the general public have about just how much information these companies have and whether or not they'll care in the face of the convenience that they've gotten used to.
And one last thing, Bob, that I think about is not just how is it impacting business, but how is it impacting human behavior? And we already know that the influence of like mobile phones have made us use different parts of our memory differently because we know we can always access that information. So if you think about the number of phone numbers you have memorized, you'll probably find that they date back to when you were a child and you didn't have a mobile phone. So now that even more aspects of your life, you're delegating information capture, you're delegating memory, you're delegating archiving to an outside source, you're almost asking, you've got a secondary brain there within very easy reach. And how is that going to change how we remember, how we learn, how we reason?
Well, it's time for us to move on. I want to talk next about how brands are being unusually stealthy about their Super Bowl plans this year. It's very atypical for the major brands to not be releasing their commercials so far in advance. We'll get to that in just a minute. But first, I want to talk about our next sponsor of the evening, Brandfolder. Look, I've been a creative in a past life, a long time ago, and I know the pain firsthand of being told that's not our most updated logo, or being asked to pull from stock images that are scattered across a dozen server links. Consistency matters in marketing communications, but how can you expect consistency with your logos, fonts, images, and brand guidelines when they're strewn all over the internet? That's why every single brand that's listening to me today needs to get an account with Brandfolder. Now, Brandfolder is the easy way to store, manipulate, distribute, and track all of your digital assets from a single location. Did you know the average creative will waste over 60 hours each year searching for misplaced brand assets? That's almost 2 weeks of productivity lost looking for needles in the haystack, digging through misplaced folders and old emails trying to find the most recent revisions and approvals. Brandfolder's platform solves all this because it allows you to distribute approved brand assets publicly or privately. It even provides in-app analytics so you can measure which assets are performing best in the marketplace. And you're not alone here, okay? You're not going to be beta testing some untried software because companies like JetBlue, Slack, Under Armour, and thousands more use Brandfolder to provide a single source of truth for all things related to their brand equity, and your company can do it too. So I want you to discover the power of Brandfolder today by going to brandfolder.com/BeanCast and unlock the complete potential of your brand assets with a free, get this, free 90-day trial. Not 60 days, not 30 days, 90 full free days to try this out and see what it can do for your company. That's Brandfolder, brandfolder.com/BeanCast to manage all of your digital assets in one location and set up your team for success in 2018. Brandfolder, strong brands live here, and we thank them very much for their support of our show. Well, we're less than a month out from the Super Bowl, but there's only moderate hype about what ad spots brands are planning to run. It's almost like everyone has decided to play it stealth this year. David, why is this year's Super Bowl run-up so markedly different from previous years? Any thoughts, any kind of word on the grapevine as to why things are going the way they are?
This is one of those things where it's like it's easy to be, can I please say it, armchair quarterback. Had to get that out before anyone else did. The really competitive crew. And so first of all, I mean, there are some kind of odd factors like CES actually ran a little bit late, and so with the whole just share of marketing buzz, and even if you look at just the marketing trades to get the word out to the diehards of the community, then there's a little bit of a shorter window. Some of it is also it's like you're for great spots that you want to release in advance, you're going to get this surge, but that doesn't last. So you have to time this right. You have to have some kind of storyline, and you still have a lot of marketers that are so focused on just getting through this round of the playoffs. Additionally, you have this culture right now where it's just easier to play things a little bit safer. It's quite possible, as some of the speculation is veering, that the ads just will be more bland this year, as no one wants to offend anyone, and it's just going to be like a lot of kumbaya stuff that people aren't going to be sharing like crazy. And it's also just quite possible that after a while of doing this for most of the past decade, that there's it's nice to see these great impression numbers that go through the roof in the a month before the Super Bowl hits, but that it's possible that just does nothing whatsoever for these veteran brands who've been at it for a while.
Also, brands know that if they talk about it too early on Facebook, no one's going to see it anyways because it's all friends and family. Seriously, folks.
That was good.
Why would anybody give away their Super Bowl ads too early anyways? Because then they're not Super Bowl ads. They're just ads that they spend a lot of money on. And people know now that, the really great ads get leaked about a week before. And I almost think that that's why the league has got that off week. I know it's so players can rest, but I also think it's part of just the whole myth of a Super Bowl ad. But anything before a week is just going to get lost. And also people know with Super Bowl ads, it's become such a thing. They don't have to leak them early because, Entertainment Tonight, if that's even a thing still, or Entertainment Weekly or anything, all these people are going to gather together all the Super Bowl ads and put them in. You get so much residual impressions and benefit from your Super Bowl spend just from all these media outlets who have no imagination. So they're just going to cover the Super Bowl. So you want to make sure that yours is a Super Bowl ad and not the ad released 60 days before the game or 30 days before the game.
I mean, all this makes sense. I mean, but is it a smart strategy in the end? I mean, it's just like everybody seems to be of the opinion that it's probably a wise move to try to, get the most bang from your buck by waiting for the actual game, maybe release or leak your ad a week before is what Saul's saying, but mainly put your emphasis on the game itself. It sounds good, but it breaks with a growing tradition over the last decade where there was a whole month-long run-up. Even if you didn't release your ad, you teased the crap out of the ad and you made it so that people were ready to watch that ad appear on the Super Bowl. And it wasn't just the ad press that was getting that kind of treatment. It was the general public was being encouraged to be part of this experience. It seems like we haven't given ourselves enough time to do that this year. And I'm wondering, is that an intentional strategy, Rose? Is that something that's going to help them out, or is that something that's going to harm them in terms of their brand equity and their ability to reach the consumer during the game?
I don't know how much of a lift we actually saw in sales based on, because I hear you about a trend in the past, say, 5 years of really building up to the Super Bowl and, telling people all about the ad prior to and doing specials running it. And, how much did it lift? How much did it really impact sales? And that's what we may have enough data now to look at and say, was it worth the spend to do this massive run up? Are we such a critical ritual behind the Super Bowl, or have we all just been kind of tricking ourselves into justifying this enormous investment in media? So, this may be everybody getting their numbers back and saying, meh, not so great. I don't know.
It may be.
I don't
I mean,
know.
I think that's a legitimate assessment that, they looked at the data and saw all that effort to do a Super Bowl run up gave them no appreciable difference. So why do that? Just focus on the actual game, which is an effective ad for the most part for most of these brands. So an interesting assessment. I want to move on to our final topic of the evening, though. Everyone is a frenemy these days. First, the ad tech companies make a play for the agency business, then the management consultancies do so. And now production houses are claiming that they can bypass agency costs to deliver their own creative product. My question, Tamsin, and we've talked about this on the show before, but is this just short-sighted or is this a real threat to agencies? What's your thoughts on production houses taking more of the pie in terms of creative development?
I think it's a threat to agencies that don't understand how to establish a niche or how to specialize. I mean, I think that in a world where you can kind of get anything from anywhere, you can hire organizations in, you can hire that creative team in. When it's just like, oh well, we could go get an agency. I don't think that one size fits all makes sense. Now, that said, yeah, I think this is definitely a big company question. I think that, agencies, even if they are generalist agencies and jack of all trades agencies, are still necessary for smaller companies, because smaller companies can't afford generally to completely insource all of that creative talent, production talent, and whatever. But I think really the danger for agency comes from not really knowing who they're for and not being clear on what their differentiating offer is to the marketplace. But otherwise, if they have that, then they should be fine.
Rose, do you agree with this? Because my first concern when I listen to what Tamsin's saying, because it makes sense and it's where my head was initially, but I think about the way a campaign evolves and having outliers, having creative that's put together outside of the overall strategy and the overall voice of the campaign makes for a potential problem going down the line in terms of brand consistency. Is a production house capable of taking on the entire strategic realm that's necessary for guiding a campaign? And if they aren't they just an agency?
Well, interesting question, because it's kind of like, where does their work play, right? So you may hire the agency to the point that I think Thompson is saying, for that front end definition of the brand, or you may have had the brand defined for absolutely ages. You then have a universal brand brief that right now companies are going to a variety of different agencies anyhow to execute upon. So why am I paying for the premium of an agency to execute on this if I can go directly to directors, videographers, etc., who aren't so one note? Okay, because one of the great challenges that we've seen across the board with ad agencies is a real challenge to kind of run the gambit of different video types, right? From the 3-second to the 6-second, etc., and make it compelling. So they've been very good at their 30 seconds to 1 minute format, but they've had real issues going into different formats and finding things that are engaging and running those all into a narrative. So you may have production houses that work across more video types than a lot of agencies do, who are just more literate. And if you're just showing a crumbled up can crumbling, like if you guys saw the recent Mountain Dew stuff, crumbling up, popping back up again, I'm sorry, that doesn't take brain surgery to figure that one out. And I don't want to pay for brain surgery when I'm getting a pedicure. So, the thing is, thanks, Tom.
that was a good one. I like that.
And that's forever the case with agencies. Brain surgery, brain surgery, brain surgery. It's not all brain surgery. And so if the production houses are benefiting from that, fine. And I know that a lot of agencies have brought production in-house because they've gone into social media more heavily and they've realized, wait a minute, we can't be gouging every single time we put something on video for the same amount as we did for the 30-second to the 1 minute. So
But they'll try.
oh, by God, won't they? So, that I think is a really critical element now of people saying, no, I don't need to pay your rates for this type of product. I'll come back to you when I need to build for the Super Bowl.
Does this actually strengthen the case of the management consultancies who say that we're doing the thinking for you and the rest of this is production? We can handle that production for you, or we can guide the production for you, but it's essentially production, which negates the whole need for a creative department in an agency, because the agency either needs to exist as a management consultancy that does the thinking, does the strategy, does the research, does the planning, essentially sets the stage, and lets a creative house, a production house, take over from there. Is that the new model that's starting to emerge, guys, or is that just wishful thinking on
I think
my part?
it's a model that will. I don't necessarily think that would become dominant, but I think that there's a good reason for that. I mean, I think there are companies who want to do the thinking themselves and then want somebody else to do the production. There are companies who want somebody else to do the thinking and then they'll do the production. And then there's companies that can't afford it, and so they'll figure out whether or not they want that general contractor model, or whether they want to take on that general contractor role, or they want to outsource that to somebody else. So this comes back to what I was saying before. If you understand, if you're an agency right now, and if the thing that you need to figure out is like, what kind of business are you for? What do they want? What do they value? What do they struggle with? Because the biggest mistake that I see consistently with agencies, with really any company, is think that they can be for all the companies out there. And in fact, the narrower the focus, the broader they'll eventually be able to reach, in my mind. And so, yes, let a new model arise, because I think it will help sort out for those agencies that actually can do for themselves what they say they do for other people, will help them stand out and ensure they've got longevity where they may not otherwise have if they try to stick to that generalist route.
And with that note, it's time for the Ad Fail 5. But before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do a shameless plug, starting with David Berkowitz. You can find him at storyhunter.com. That's where he is the new head of marketing over there. Tell us, David, what's going on in your world? What would you like to promote?
Well, I'd like to promote that the entire last segment is basically the raison d'etre for Story Hunter. So listen to that segment, go to storyhunter.com, and you can make the connection, and just happy to chat more about that anytime.
Awesome. Fantastic. Next up, Rose Cameron. Rose, the best place to find you is always on the Twitters and on the LinkedIn, but anything that's coming up in your world, what would you like to promote?
I would like to promote this week Peace and Joy across the world. It's all getting a bit mucky out there, boys and girls. As you probably know, Bob, I'm traveling around 200 days out of a year at the moment, and I'm seeing a lot more of the world than I did when I was kind of shut in as the director of innovation at Penn State. And I just got to say, people be nice to each other out there. It's a Hill Street Blues moment. It's a rough time. I see a lot when I travel of discontent, and please just spare a smile for each other when you're traveling and you're out amongst all of the people of the world.
Oh, that's a nice sentiment. Thank you so much. Next up, we have Saul Colt. You can find him at theideaintegration.com. That's the home of the Idea Integration Company. Tell us what's going on in your world, Saul. What would you like to promote?
I was going to say everything that Rose said, but since she said it, I'll shamelessly plug my own stuff. So I've spoken many times on the show about I Make a Living. It's a monthly event. It's a podcast. I want to proudly declare that we hit over 55,000 downloads for the podcast, and that may not seem like a huge number if you're the This American Lives of the world. I don't mean per episode, I mean total, but we're only about 8 or 9 episodes in. But it's a big deal for me. I'm really proud of it. So if you guys are interested in hearing some really interesting conversations, of course, my dear friend Bob Norp, I don't know if you guys have heard of him. He's the co-host with me on the show, and we do really interesting stuff. And just in the past couple of weeks, we've had some people have been on the BeanCast before, like Chris Brogan. We've had Chris Hoyer, we've had Jeremy Tanner. People are talking about their relationships with money. People are talking about, active patients versus passive patients. This is something I'm really proud of. And the live event kicks up again in February. We'll be in Los Angeles on February 21st. I'm going to have a really interesting lineup for LA because we're a year into this thing and we've proven that it's like something people should be taking care of. Our guests are getting way of higher stature, and one of the first people we have to confirm to be on our panel in LA is Ralph Garman. Ralph Garman, of course, is a voice on Family Guy. He's the co-host of Hollywood Babylon, the podcast with Kevin Smith, the director, as well as he's on the CBS show The Orville. So very excited to have Ralph Garman on the show, at the event. So if you're curious about the podcast, please check it out at www.thepodcast.co. That's .co, not .com. We left the last M off for savings. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I love that show. I'm really glad to be a part of it. So definitely check that out. Next up, Tamsin Webster. You can find her at tamsinwebster.com. How convenient. Tell us what's going on in your world, Tamsin. What would you like to promote?
Well, I'd like to promote the fact that I have reached now recording in the can 52 of my Find the Red Thread short video podcast that I put out every week. So I would love if that's a thing that you like to do, spend 4 to 8 minutes every week learning a little bit more about how to make your messages more powerful or how it is that you can create change with your ideas, turn ideas into action. Head on over to youtube.com/Tamsin Webster and subscribe and see what you think. Would love you to take a look, comment, and add that to your viewing pleasure.
Definitely. Absolutely. You want to work with Tamsin. She's one of the best. So definitely check out her content. And as for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me. And of course, if you're an advertiser, find out how to advertise on the program. So check it all out at thebeancast.com. And now it's time for the Ad Fail 5, a rundown of the lowest moments in advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. And first up, McDonald's Canada had to pull some radio advertisements that suggested, Saul, that spending $5 at a museum was a waste of money when it could buy you lunch. So what's your thoughts on this situation with McDonald's comparing lunch with a museum tour?
So it's silly one, but my question is, where can you get into a museum for $5? I paid $7 to get into the McDonald's Museum in San Bernardino, California.
Oh, man. Now, next up, Mountain Dew has a new flavor. It's basically called Sprite, or at least that's what the sentiment of customers who find no appreciable difference between the new Mountain Dew product and the venerable Coke brand. David, I don't know that they necessarily had a fail here, but this became a huge PR issue for them. Their new Dew Ice essentially tastes like Sprite, and the only difference is it has caffeine, right?
Yeah, well, they were just going to try it outright and call it decaf Sprite, but I think there was some kind of cease and desist from Coke's lawyers, and so in a way, it's a great sort of backdoor into the positioning for it. It's like, well, I'm full calf Sprite. Sorry, it's getting late. Screwed up my own punchline.
That's all
Damn
right.
it.
That's all right. Now, next up, Golden Globes viewers were outraged by a L'Oreal ad, Tamsin, that seemed to compare Winona Ryder's career to damaged hair. I watched this ad. I frankly didn't understand what the big deal was. I mean, it's a stupid ad. Let's be clear about that. But it's not. It doesn't seem offensive. Am I missing something here?
I mean, the thing is, at the heart of it is like she agreed to it. It's so if Winona's okay with it, I'm okay with it. But as the article I read said, like, I just wish they would have, they would have gone a little bit more full Winona Ryder there and done some kind of Heather's reference. Like, what's your damage?
Well, yeah, really.
So here's the thing. This is what happens when you do an inside joke that 7 people are going to get. I actually fully understood it. Because when Stranger Things won its first, I don't know what award, Emmy or something, she came up and it looked like she just like walked out of a windstorm. And so, but it's such a minutia, like inside reference that nobody understood it. So they assumed it was an insult. It was a little insulting, but there was a thought process behind it. They just didn't let anyone in on the joke.
Saul, it's so telling that the gay community got it and nobody else did.
Are you outing me, Rose?
Right? I'm not saying a word, Saul.
Now, in a year of Me Too and Time's Up, CES exhibitors seem to have learned absolutely nothing, Rose, featuring, in addition to the usual booth babes, an entire booth of pole dancing robots with a co-branding of Sapphire Strip Club. You'd think you'd learn something from the situation going on around them, but nobody seems to have been paying attention.
Yeah, no. I got to say, I was in Las Vegas right before the whole gunfire incident. And I was so amazed that it was the only place left in the United States I could still smoke freely. So obviously they didn't get the memo on smoking health, and they definitely didn't get the memo on women. So
on the bright side, it was only one booth doing that this year.
Only one booth with robot strippers as opposed to real strippers.
More than one with booth babes, though.
Oh yeah, and I thought about it, and I thought, because immediately I had my feminist angst, and then I said, gosh, they're probably so desperate, just so desperate to get out there. If it takes a 48 triple D to get a photograph done and shared via social media, I think I have big money to make next year at CES. That's all I got to say.
That's great. And last but not least, and this one everybody has heard of this week, H&M advertised a new hoodie for kids featuring a dark-skinned boy model, and the words on the sweatshirt said, "Coolest monkey in the jungle." The outrage was off the charts, Saul. I mean, everybody got offended about this. What's your opinion about this particular situation with H&M, and what's their response? How do they deal with this?
So I don't know how that passed like any sort of marketing department or like anything. So that's mind-boggling to me. But I did hear that one that was rejected was that it was a hoodie and it said George Zimmerman approved.
Oh no.
You're bad.
Oh man. We could have
But
the
that's
show
probably
title.
because
Inside
they had
jokes.
a production house, do it, and they didn't have the legal representation to check it. So
all joking aside, I did read that their defense was that they're not a North American company, so they didn't understand why that was a big deal.
Except that this happened in the UK, didn't it?
Yeah.
I don't understand. Well, have something to add to this list or just want to discuss it? Comment online. Use the hashtag AdFail5. That's pound, AdFail, and the number 5. Well, that just about does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an iTunes listener, we've also provided a direct link to the iTunes Music Store, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory of iTunes. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C-Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
what I mean? I don't know, man. Just like, okay, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know, like if it's, you know, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly. It's like exactly. Yeah. You know what I mean? Exactly.
Cool beans.